or else they just simply won't survive at a startup, right? Because, in the words of Elon Musk, right, like working at a startup is like eating broken glass every day.
SaaS Insiders, I welcome you to this episode of our show. Today I'm honored to be joined with Pete Ryan. He is a founder of CoSell, and today we're going to talk a lot of topics, starting from investment, bringing the right people to your team, and just having those metrics internally that will tell you whether you're growing or not sustainably. With that said, Pete, I welcome you to the show.
Thanks for having me, Vlad.
For those who might not know you yet, if you could give a 60-second introduction on who the Pete is, or where you're coming from, background wise, and what you're working on right now.
Sure. Yeah. So Pete Ryan, co-founder at CoSell. We founded the company about 2.5 years ago. It's a relationship platform for B2B sales teams. Where I started off in my career was in San Francisco, working at Oracle in Redwood City. And so selling database and fusion middleware. Spent about a year at Oracle and was like, okay, I want to join a smaller company. And that company was LinkedIn, which had about 200 employees. And so they were just kind of getting their sales team rocking and rolling. And so I was in the first class of salespeople to join. Kind of, got a few promotions while I was there, helped start up the LinkedIn Sales Solutions division, leading up their SMB sales team. And so, yeah, at the time it was just LinkedIn inside of Salesforce. That was the product. And obviously today it's very much more built out with, LinkedIn Sales Navigator. But yeah, we basically brought on the first 100 customers, went on to kind of join Double Dutch because I wanted to go even smaller, which was, a company that was in the mobile event app space, was mentored by the co-founder, Pankaj Prasad. Great experience working there. Then started my own company, GoGoHire, which was a hiring marketplace for sales talent. And then joined Trello as their head of enterprise sales. Trello got acquired by Atlassian. Atlassian is really where I kind of stumbled across, referrals for sales as being a really major pain point. And so here we are with CoSell 2.5 years in and loving every minute of it. And that's, yeah, if there's anything else you want to add, happy to chat about it.
Well, you mentioned quite a few names behind your shoulders in terms of experience. So I'm pretty sure
Yeah.
SaaS Insiders are really curious to learn from your experience. So when you started the
Yeah.
CoSell, because you start from zero, right, as a company, the question is, how do you get the right team? I know you have a very specific opinion on how do you qualify people and how do you treat the resumes when they come in? How do you treat those big names on their sheets, on their CVs? I'm curious to learn, what's your take on this? Let's say I'm a SaaS insider. I'm about to start my own company. I need a team. Like, what do I do to pick the
Yeah.
best ones?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So, early days of CoSell, right? It was just myself and Brendan Cassidy. And so I knew Brendan, from our days at LinkedIn. He was really early there. He was like employee 15 at LinkedIn. And so I had known him for a number of years. He was actually a customer of mine when I was working on GoGoHire. And so it was just us, right? And, we basically had to build out our own kind of engineering and product team. And so the first place you want to start, when you're looking to kind of build out that team, or just really, employees kind of like 2 to 10, right? You definitely want to go kind of with, that is in my mind just the best place to start. And so even when you go inside, even if it's a second degree connection, you want to do a ton of back channel references. I think the biggest learning, for us is like, even if you think the candidate is the perfect candidate on paper, right, with a lot of big names, experience kind of in companies that have grown substantially in the kind of 0 to 1 phase, right, of like 2 to 10 employees, having those like big names are just, it becomes completely irrelevant, right? And so really what you want to look for is like that hustle, that aptitude, and that love for like solving problems in the 0 to 1 category. In the startup world, folks that are resilient and persistent and just like overall driven, right? And so folks that I think someone have like a bit of a chip on their shoulder are the people you're wanting to look for, right? And so you know if they have kind of that 0 to 1 experience, that's all the better. If they don't, then you have to look for these other attributes, right, in them, or else they just simply won't survive at a startup, right? Because in the words of Elon Musk, right, like working at a startup is like eating broken glass every day. And so you actually have to learn how to like be okay with things in the world around your startup not being okay, right? And that's kind of an uncomfortable position to be in. But if you have folks that have like just always been in this like okay world at this big company, things are like, just growing and growing, and you're not having to solve like real problems, right? In kind of the 0 to 1 category, then those folks aren't really necessarily the right folks for you to be looking at and hiring. And so that would be my biggest advice for startups looking to find folks is it's less about the resume, way more about, aptitude, look for traits like, people that have like a little bit of a chip on their shoulder. And obviously one thing I completely left out is like they have to fit with your culture. And so, early on, right, kind of think about the values that you own, right, as a human being, because that is a little bit a part of like the DNA of your company. And then when you're probably around like, 5 to 10 employees, like actually start to think about, okay, like what does the DNA of our company look like? Like what are the values that are non-negotiable for us? Write those down, and that's kind of what's going to propel your company forward and keeping everyone aligned, right? Because if your values aren't aligned, like execution becomes really, really tough, right? Because you're not rowing the boat all in the same direction. And so, yeah, that's can certainly talk a lot more about like people and culture, but I'll kind of wrap it up there.
Well, I do agree that culture is a separate topic for 1 hour conversation or maybe
Yeah,
like multiple
totally.
day event.
Yeah.
I totally resonate with what you said because when I initially started, I was looking for technical skills in my company. So the first 3 hires, it was mostly like, hey, let me get someone who knows how to do this thing. But as we grew, we understood that people need to be on the same wavelength. And if they're not, it's irrelevant. So now everyone's kind of afraid I'll be doing a technical interview with them, but we actually just do the talk, and we actually just talk to their values and what they want to achieve in life. And based on that, of course, because we read their skills, the technical skills, but it's most like, are there the people that we see ourselves work with in the next couple of years is basically what defines our decision. Do we want them or not?
That's exactly right. Yeah, it's a lot of the soft skills, right, that you can't really see on a piece of paper or resume, and because folks and you can learn the hard skills, right? You can learn how to become a better engineer, a better salesperson, et cetera, et cetera. It's the things around, it's the soft stuff, right? The persistence, the drive, that kind of chip on your shoulder that makes or breaks, that first founding team of a startup.
Yeah, I mean, in the end of the day, you would probably be seeing and talking to them more than you see your family during like early stages, right? So this will be the
Oh
people you'll
yeah,
be talking
without a
with a
doubt.
lot. And if you hate them or you cannot work with them, I mean, what good does it make if they know the technical stuff, right? If you just cannot communicate with them.
100%. Yeah, couldn't agree with that more. Yeah.
One thing, kind of moving to the next topic I wanted to ask you about is, so let's say you have a team, and as a SaaS founder, of course, you need to launch your product. Obviously, the first version that everyone calls MVP, which
Hmm.
for some reason is not a objective but a subjective term these days. Everyone
Yeah,
defines
yeah.
MVP the way they want to.
Hmm.
I'm curious, how did you approach building your first version, your MVP to market? Basically, like how much time it took, but well, what it was, the process. How do you define what the MVP is? What do you think are the things you would do differently, maybe if you were to go back in time? Some learning experiences.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the biggest advice I can give to any founder is that, in my experience, right, like people will only use your product if it helps them achieve a job to be done or a goal that they're looking to achieve faster with less effort and higher accuracy than any other alternative out there in the market, right? If you're not like at least 3x better in those categories against any other alternative, they simply like won't use it and they won't continue to use it. And so there was actually a product manager, an advisor of ours, who actually recommended us checking out Thrive. So it basically, they have this whole course, right, of like videos around, what is jobs to be done theory, because you can read plenty of books around like jobs to be done. But yeah, it feels like these videos really dive deeper into it. Plus, there's software to kind of back it up. And so, I think the first thing is like, okay, are you solving a job that one is worth solving, right? And then two, are you are you doing in a way that, again, is the lowest effort, the fastest, and with the highest level of accuracy? And so I think if you look at like the best products out there, right, they do those things in an order of magnitude better than any other alternative. And the greater the delta, the more powerful, the more expensive, the more reach, right, you're going to have with the product, so on and so forth. And so, when we built our MVP, I would say we didn't really follow that, right? It was more like, okay, this is a really interesting space we want to be in. We built this product, we got it in the hands of users, and we didn't really think through like, okay, in their day to day, like, is this actually helping them solve a problem, or accomplish a job that they've hired us to do? And it took actually a few iterations, right, for us to figure that out. And we're still figuring it out, right? But today it's for us, the job, right, is I'm a seller. I need to hit my quota. I need to reach target buyers. I need to close business. And introductions and referrals are definitely the best way to do that, most strategic way to do that. And especially with what's happened in the market, we're in this economic downturn. Companies are thinking about, okay, how do we go to market more profitably? Sellers and prospects, right, alike, they're so fed up with like cold outreach, cold email, cold calling, cold in-mail, and you throw like AI and automation on top of that, and it actually just like makes the problem so much worse. And so for every CRO and CMO that we talk to, they're always like, okay, this year, right, it's less about, we're going to do those things, we're going to do kind of cold outreach, all of that as a go-to-market channel, we're going to do the demand gen, but we're also going to look at like partner-led growth, we're going to look at community-led growth and product-led growth. And then for us, right, we're like, okay, well, world, wake up. Relationship-led growth is right in front of us, right? And so, the most strategic path to entry is through someone and so, that could be an investor, an advisor, a customer, a partner, a friend that you have at another company. And so, for us, we kind of built this MVP that basically is a Chrome extension. It sits on top of LinkedIn. And so if, as a seller, if I'm trying to reach, so and so, obviously I can figure out how to do that. I can navigate that by like sending an email to the mutual connection or send an email to the mutual connection, but none of it is like operationalized. And so that's what we built with Co-Sell, is like, it's just a couple clicks. You can request the intro. We've made it really easy for the connector to then forward on the intro. And then for the sales leader, right, and the head of marketing, it's all about like, have I, how many leads have we generated through relationship-led growth? How many deals have been closed? And so we offer that like reporting and analytics. And so, yeah, I think just, biggest learning for us is spend that time really focused on the problem itself, right? Talk to a ton of users, and like kind of put them into different cohorts, right? Start to look at patterns of like, okay, and get super, super specific around like who your key user is. Definitely follow I believe it, right? I believe in the jobs to be done framework, hands down. I think there's other frameworks that you can also pull in. And then, yeah, build something, MVP, it's morphed over time, right? I think the bar for like an MVP has just gotten way higher, right? Because there's just more SaaS companies out there and technology companies. And so it's more like your minimum workable product, right? It has to work. It has to accomplish, the job that you've set out to accomplish. And so, do those things, and then, stay in front of your users. And, we talked about this before the call, Vlad. There's like certain winning metrics, right, that you want to focus in on. And our investor, Tim Connor, hammered this into us. And I believe this like through and through, is that the first thing you want to focus on is winning metric 0, which is, do people like your product? I'm sorry, no, does it work, right? Can they get the job done that they've hired you to do? And then the first metric is, do they like it, or do they like it, right? So when you message them about it, they're like, oh yeah, this is awesome, I really like it a lot, right? And then winning metric 2 is, do they really like it? So look at Mixpanel or Amplitude or whatever you're using for your analytics, and look at, okay, how many users are coming back, what cohorts of users are coming back, are they coming back and doing that desired action that you're looking to have them take? And then winning metric 3 is really, can you grow profitably, right? Can through, can via the channels, right, that you're selling your product through, whether it be, sales led, marketing led, partner led, relationship led, can you do that profitably, right? And so if you can do that, then it's just about pouring more gas on the fire. And that's, I kind of took your question, Vlad, and expanded big time on it over the last 2.5 years. I would say those are the biggest learnings that we've had as a company.
Just before we dive into metrics and growth at all costs, things like becoming
Yeah.
kind of irrelevant these days, one thing I'm wondering is, do you remember how much time it took you from, okay, we need an MVP, to the point where, yes, we're launching the MVP? Do you remember how much, maybe months or weeks, I don't know, it took you to get this off the ground, like the first version that you launched to your users?
Yeah. So for us, I'd say 3 months, but we spent like when you have all the design in place and you've battle tested the design, and that's another thing I really recommend is like spend a lot of time on the design phase. Because like before you start throwing a bunch of code at it, like code is just it's kind of like, you're solidifying the product into where it just becomes a lot harder to change. And so if you spend a lot of time in kind of that, building the high fidelity prototypes in Figma, getting users to click through it, asking them like, what they like about it, what they change, and then just kind of view like, how they're clicking through it. Are they getting stuck? Those are all things that I think are, somewhat overlooked, because like we all, as founders, right, we want to rush into, okay, we got to build this product and we got to go sell it, right? And so, yeah, the more time you can spend in, user testing, user research, design, testing, and then even prior to that, that like jobs to be done framework, I think, again, that's where you'll learn a lot, right? You'll avoid a lot of mistakes from, at the end of the day, you still need a product that people can click through, is until it's in the wild and like launched. And so that's another thing, is like build something that is flexible enough, and to where if you decide to kind of go right or left, you can do that, because it's very likely that you're going to have to kind of change in a way. And so if you build it flexible enough, then like, you're not kind of like hard coded into like one aspect of the business or product. And so, yeah, those are all kind of some additional tips I'm throwing out there.
Pete, I like 3 months. I really like it. I would say, when people are speaking about weeks, that's getting exciting, right? But I think having 2 to 3 months to build an MVP is a really good point. When I interview founders on this podcast, a lot of times they say it took us 11 months, 15 months to see the first version. And I'm like, oh my God, this can be done so much faster, right? If it's done right. So I want to recognize
Mm-hmm.
that your speed to execution is pretty phenomenal.
I completely agree. Like, I do think it also depends on the product itself, right? I have like one, yeah, I have a friend who's kind of doing this like generative AI stuff, and it's just like super, super technical. So, his time horizon for launch is just, yeah, I think like the more you can like cut back. So if you give yourself 3 months, you're like, okay, this is our launch date, right? And the more you can cut back, you'll realize that like you don't need all those features that you thought you needed. So, anyways, all I'm saying is we're aligned there, Vlad. So, yeah.
I like it. I like your concept of setting the deadline rather than the scope you want to achieve, right? Because that will make it like you make the scope variable, not the timeline, and then you work in favor of making the MVP as lean as possible. One
For
question
sure.
I was wondering, you were talking about important metrics that define whether you can succeed with the SaaS business, and one of them, the last one, number 3, you said grow profitably, right? And grow profitably means grow sustainably, because
Mm-hmm.
obviously if you're burning through cash, there's a certain limit, like certain amount of time you can do that. After that, you need to raise again, right? So my question is, there's an idea, or at least it was an idea, of venture-backed SaaS companies is growth at all cost, meaning that we want to acquire as many users as possible and grow to as many multiples as possible in 1 year and then the next year, so that we can exit as fast as possible. So my question to you, from your landscape, now that you also raised funds for your company and you're actively running it, do you see that shifting from growth at all cost into profitability? And if so, what do you think are the reasons, and what do you think is happening on the market of VC funded startups at the moment?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you saw in the growth stage, right? Just like every growth stage company, right? They raised at so much money at these crazy multiples. We were kind of like all drunk on, the market and what happened there. And so there's been this huge influx of cash to the point where, we're going to see just a lot of companies just either get scooped up and acquired because that's the better option for them versus raising at a massive down round, or if they haven't made cuts already, right? We're going to see a lot of companies perish, right? That's just what's going to happen. And so, you know, I think, so, yeah. I mean, your point around grow at all costs, right? It has been that way in the valley for a very long time. And so, yeah, I think there's this whole new concept of let's turn a profit. Like, who would have thought, right? And so, now that we're in this kind of new era of profitability, it becomes even more important for companies to look at new strategies versus kind of how Salesforce grew, right? Salesforce invested, it was like a 1 to 2 ratio of like, okay, for every dollar spent in sales and marketing equaled $2 in revenue, right? And so, and that's just, I would say that those days of growing in that way are really just not sustainable anymore, right? Because those channels that we all relied on for sales and marketing have become so noisy to where it's hard to grow your company on the back of just sales led and marketing led and expect that kind of 1 to 2 ratio, right? Of okay, I'm going to spend X amount on building out an SDR team or BDR team. We're going to spend X amount on marketing spend, digital marketing, and then we're going to expect, and that's going to equal, twice as much, right? That so and that multiple, by the way, isn't even that sexy anymore, right? Because you've seen companies like Atlassian, right, that have been just known for no sales team. Although I did work there, and I know that they have a sales team, but just they grew for like 20 years with really very limited sales team, right? They're just all product led growth, and so they kind of invented the model of being able to grow this way. But even those companies, right, that were PLG companies that had these crazy multiples, I mean, we've certainly seen them, that simmer down as well. And so I think it's almost like you have to do all these things, unfortunately, right? You kind of have to do the sales led, marketing led in some capacity. You need to do the PLG, you need to do the CLG, right? Community led growth. And in our opinion, you need to do relationship led growth also. And so you know it's really about like where you sequence those things, right? Because you're gonna have one channel kind of plateau, and you're gonna have to realize, okay, I need to figure out like what's our next growth lever, right? And hopefully your product and engineering team are building different products, expanding on the suite of products you're offering to increase your ACV. So yeah, it's kind of a blend of all these things. The sequencing of them are obviously going to be different, right? Because you early days, right, you can certainly get by with sales led growth, marketing led growth, relationship led growth. But then eventually you're going to want to figure out PLG or partner led growth,
Mhm.
product led growth, all that and so those things can happen later, but more and more companies are kind of hitting that ceiling just relying on like sales led and marketing led. I mean, yeah, the days of Salesforce, right? Like that was their go to market strategy. I mean, I think those days are dwindling. I mean, we are
Mhm.
seeing, you probably heard on that like All In podcast, right? Them talking, our company's actually going to need investment, right? Or can you just bootstrap with Copilot, right? And if you're able to, bootstrap with Copilot, your engineers are 3x more productive, yeah, is it or 10x more productive, these like 10x engineers, right? So yeah, where does that go, right? I think that's a bit extreme, right? I think it's a bit extreme. Like I think companies will need to raise some amount of capital because yeah, you can't just build a product and like expect that users will come, right? That's just not how it works. But I think there will be like a happy medium of companies needing to raise less, right? Because they're more capital efficient. They're more, they're getting more out of AI, and other technologies. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see what the next 10 years looks like. I mean, it's getting, Reid Hoffman always used to say, like, the future is it's always stranger than you think, and it happens faster than you think, right? And so I think that's kind of held true even in the last 10 years, right? It's definitely like, the things that have happened, Apple
Mm.
Vision, all these things are really wild technologies that really didn't exist, call it 10, 15 years ago. So, or they did exist, but, not in the way that they do today. So,
I think AI is probably the most impactful out of those that you mentioned, because just like you said, Copilot, ChatGPT, and you probably can have a team of 3 people instead of that team of 10. I've heard a lot of stories from secondhand of 2 people, 2 co-founders building a SaaS company. One of them is
right,
leveraging ChatGPT to write emails, to write all of the posts, schedule hundreds of posts, high quality. The other one is using ChatGPT to write code. And when they approach VCs are asking them, well, if I give you $1 million, how are you going to spend it? And they say, like, we don't need 1 million.
you're right, right, yeah,
We need 50K, so we have 2 salaries. That's all we need,
right,
and we'll just take it to the next level. So it almost feels like there's going to be this era of like micro investments where the entry barrier to enter SaaS world is much lower now, because you don't need to have a team of like 100 people. You can do the
hmm,
same amount
yeah,
of team of 10 if you do it correctly, and basically the cost will go down, and that will mean that they could raise a much lower rounds. So I'm really looking forward to see how it unfolds. I'm not sure how it will impact the investor side, because if
right,
they have a few million, if they have like 50 million to deploy, and now instead of writing $1 million checks, they're writing $10,000 checks. That's a lot of
hmm,
checks you need to write.
yeah,
That's a
that's right.
printer. You need to print them. That's how fast you need to do. So I'll be curious to know how it affects the decision making process, and what are the other, like, say, alternative ways to close those deals will be happening. Because if there is such a huge volume of checks you need to write, you might be simplifying some of your due diligence and some of the process. So really looking forward to see how it all unfolds.
100%. Yeah. I mean, the other thing too that, is hiring remote, right? Because, you can like if you're based in the US, hire overseas. And, I would say we've had a lot of luck in hiring overseas. And it feels like the work ethic is actually stronger. The work ethic is stronger. So it's like ChatGPT, Copilot, hiring overseas. And, before you know it, like your costs have gone way down, right? I think, and also like even doesn't have to be overseas. I mean, it could be just folks outside of New York City, San Francisco, and these like large metropolitan areas where, a, a 10x engineer, right, may cost like 400K in San Francisco, whereas 10x engineer in anywhere else in the world, right, is much less, right? And so yeah, it'll be. I think that'll be interesting, right? That will definitely be interesting to see how things evolve. But yeah, it's already kind of dissipated out of SF in a way, right, to other parts of the U.S. And then the question is, okay, is it going to dissipate even further outside of the U.S. and other countries, more so than what's happened today, right? I don't know. I mean, I'd love your thoughts on that, right? Because yeah, you moved to Austin, just a few months ago, so.
I would say, because some of part of my teams are from Ukraine and Europe, we still have 7 to 8 hour difference with them,
Mhm.
and I can definitely see it being an obstacle. It's not a hard wall that we hit, but it definitely makes things higher feel like tougher. We need to kind of ride a bike uphill a little bit because of that. So I would say time zone difference will still remain, but just like you said about San Francisco and those popular areas, if you look up the commercial real estate, which was extremely, let's say, unbreakable asset, it was like an asset class that felt to be the most stable. Now those offices are just empty. There are a lot of.
Right.
Someone gave
I
a
know.
statistic of like 40% of offices in San Francisco are empty. Don't quote me on this, but I heard it's 2 digit of percentage of
Hmm.
offices that are currently not used, because it's resource inefficient. Just like you said, profitability first, right? If you can hire someone outside of the city, outside of the Bay Area, you're spending less time on the actual resources. You spend less time on money on the office. and overall it's just like more efficient. So it's going to be a really big shift, I think, that will impact not only SaaS but all the industries that are connected to it. For example, commercial real estate as a result.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, 100%. I mean, yeah, you have what Salesforce, Twitter, Facebook, all kind of pulling out of SF. The Salesforce tower, right? I guess that's, becoming empty in a way. So yeah, it's pretty wild, all the things that are happening in San Francisco. Yeah, I think more good stuff to come. I think it's all positive, and yeah, it'll be, say, next 10 years. I'm excited to be a part of it.
Well, I guess people learned something from COVID and from the isolation. So I think over this couple of years, they learned that remote work exists and it's pretty much possible. So I'm also excited to see how it all unfolds. Pete,
Yeah,
one question I'm asking all the time on SaaS Insiders, which is, you probably read some books during your journey, entrepreneurial journey. You probably watched some inspirational speakers, joined some communities that helped you grow as a person and as a founder. If you could name 2 to 3 resources, be it once again books, speakers, mentors, communities, what are the things that you would recommend others to tap into that helped you in a big way?
for sure. Yeah, so I'm a really big advocate of behavioral psychology, and so books like Drive or Nudge or Predictably Irrational. These are books I like literally keep on my desk, and I kind of flip through them every so often. Because yeah, when it comes to user behavior, when it comes to like what drives, people on your team, those are just like great books. I'm a big fan of. From like just a day to day kind of, like, there's a lot of CEO books out there, founder books. This one I would say is different, right? Because it goes into like the tactical day to day. And it's a book called The Great CEO Within. And so, yeah, huge fan of that book. And so, yeah, that's book wise. That's like book wise. I guess like, you know, I'm less of a podcast person, and so more like I'm Audible. The latest hack is like, you get the Audible, you get it up to like 1.5x or maybe even 2x, and then you read along. And I find that I just like fly through books, but also retain the info. And so yeah, that's kind of it's more expensive, right? Because you got to buy the Audible plus the book. But yeah, I found that to be a really good thing. So yeah,
I'm a big fan of audiobooks as well. It helps you use your, let's say, idle time. So when you're
yeah,
on a
yeah,
massage or when you're
yeah,
walking somewhere, when you're doing some things that don't require your, say, like mental bandwidth, if you could use the
yep,
time efficiently, you're basically, let's say, winning a couple hours in your time that would be wasted otherwise. So I really like
100%.
that. Really like that.
Yeah, same
Uh,
here.
Pete, for those who are willing to, SaaS insiders, if they want to learn with you, maybe add value to you, maybe some potential investors who will be looking to collaborate with you, what would be the best way to get in touch? We'll be leaving those things in the comment, not in comment, but in the description. But just I wanted to
Mhm.
ask you: is it the email? Is it the LinkedIn? What's the best way to approach you?
Yeah, yeah. So you can find me on LinkedIn if you just type in Pete Ryan at CoSell. I should pop up. And then, yeah, if anyone wants to shoot me an email, that's fine too. It's just Pete at cosell.io. And always happy to chat. I'm a pretty open book, and I'll give it to you straight. So yeah, feel free to reach out.
Awesome. Pete, on the final note, I wanted to ask you if there was this one big idea that SaaS Insiders picked from this episode. Let's say they heard nothing but this idea. If this is the only thing they took home with them, what do you think that will be?
Yeah, I think jobs to be done, right? Like for us, I like that is just, for me personally, right? That's been as not really like a product founder, right? And someone has like kind of up level my skill set there as we've been thinking about product, like really thinking through kind of, okay, what is the job to be done to accomplish a user's goal faster with the least amount of effort and the highest level of accuracy. And if you can get that right, and if you can do that in an order of magnitude better than any other alternative, then you're going to be on the right track, no matter what. Or not no matter what, but there's always market conditions. There's all these other things and competition, et cetera. But if you can do that right, then you're like one step of the way there.
Pete Ryan, everyone. Pete, I thank you so much for joining me today on the show. SaaS Insiders, make sure to check CoSell, make sure to connect with Pete, and we'll see you in the next episodes.